Reparative therapy, first of all, takes a lot of its information from the psychoanalytic. And there is really a rich psychoanalytic tradition of understanding the cause and treatment of homosexuality, but that whole body of literature from the 1920s all the way up to about the 1970s have been buried politically. But when I go back to the early literature, I see that they see what we see today. It's spoken of in psychoanalytic terms, but in terms of understanding and treating the homosexual who wants to change, it's a rich mine of information. And these were great psychoanalytic writers and thinkers, and their contribution has been buried politically. The causes of homosexuality were clearly stated, but the treatment was lacking. All we had was a psychoanalytic treatment, which is lying on the couch for years and free associating. And so I began to incorporate some of the techniques that are used in other therapies and refined it and applied it to this population. And so really the contribution of reparative therapy today in the last 15 years has been the techniques that we apply to the client to bring about change. As far as our reparative therapy from 1990 to the present, I would say that we've gone through 3 phases. The 3 phases was just a typical psychoanalytic approach, which is having the client talk, having him express his feelings, giving some interpretation, hoping that the interpretation would bring about change. We got some success with that during the early 90s. But then we encountered that many of our men who come into us with same-sex attraction, there is a passivity, there is a helplessness, there's a hopelessness, there is a fear of assertion, there's a preoccupation with approval, there's a low self-esteem. And these men they kind of shut down. And what we would call them in our group supervision, because we would meet once a week, the entire staff at the clinic, and we would talk about these clients, and we would call them the jellyfish clients or the Teflon clients. You couldn't grab a hold of them. And they didn't want to be homosexual, but they were passive in session. They just sat there. They didn't know what to do. We couldn't get them the momentum going. About 2005, we began to discover this, what we call affect-focused therapy, where we would get the client into his body, into his feelings, a triangle of containment. Go to the image, what are you feeling in your body, stay connected to me. No rambling, no free association, no dream analysis. How do you feel now about what you're talking about? The client comes in with an identified conflict. He holds on to a snapshot image in his mind of that identified conflict. How do you feel in your body? Stay with it, stay connected to the therapist. That's the affect-focused therapy. And that was a major breakthrough in the theory of the reparative therapy. The reason why it was a breakthrough is because we discovered that the man with a homosexual problem is really emotionally shut down, and that sets him up for homosexual enactment. Okay, so we discovered that body work, which is to say penetrating the affect, focusing on feeling and getting away from free association, push these clients into really getting into deeper feelings. And that was a big step forward. Then we went through the 3rd phase, which is EMDR. And we find that EMDR fast forwards and the body work that we discovered. And EMDR started about, I would say, 2010. So basically in every session, when the client walks in, you're doing a little open-ended free association because the client needs to talk and to get into feelings and to explore. That's perfectly fine. But then we try to move as quickly as possible to body work or EMDR. And EMDR is really fast-forwarding the therapy, and we're using it specifically on homosexual images. In our early theoretical development of reparative therapy, we put the focus on the father. The boy reaches out to the father. He feels the father rejects him. The father shows disinterest. The boy gets narcissistically injured. So in the development of reparative therapy, in what I've been doing for the last 10 years, we've been putting originally the focus on the relationship with the father and son, which it is very critical. But now we've been going back further and looking at the early relationship between the mother and the son. And the mother's attunement, malattunement sensitizes the boy to dissociate. In other words, when mom checks out, my defense is just to zone out. It's called dissociation. Checking out, zoning out. We call it the gray zone. It was Alan Shore. If anybody wants to do a Google search on Alan Shore, he is a giant in psychology today. He was the one that taught me that the pre-homosexual boy, the boy who eventually becomes homosexual, has a relationship with the mother in that when he sees her displeasure, he goes into shutdown mode. So his neurophysiology, his neurobiology is conditioned into shutting down when he sees mommy's face of hurt, disapproval, or anger. So he's ready to go into that, okay? Now he grows up and he meets the father. Now, he has to bond with the father. Now typically, I would say universally, these fathers are distant and emotionally detached. So when the boy sees the father is emotionally detached, he shuts down. I want to go to my father. I want my father to be excited for me. I want my father to see me and make me feel good about me as his son. So the boy is biologically wired to say, hey daddy, you're a big strong guy. What about me? I'm a boy. I'm different from mommy, right? Now it's you and me, right? And so he wants the father to look at him with interest and excitement and affirmation. And most of these fathers are typically shut down, preoccupied, disconnected. So the boy looks and he sees that face of disinterest and he gets the drop. This is right brain communication. This is nonverbal, okay? And he gets that drop because again, he was conditioned by the mother to drop. All right? Okay, so he abandons his masculine identity. He gives up the ambition, the natural biological ambition to be male. I can't be male. Look at daddy's face. When I run to him and show him this little rock that I discovered, when I show him this little toy that I discovered, he looks at me like I am not important. And so the unconscious, and that's what right brain communication is. The right brain communication is unconscious communication. The unconscious communication from my father, who is the personification of the world of men. He is the ambassador of the world of men, my first contact. He's showing me I do not score. I do not count. There must be something wrong with me. And that's the beginning of shame. Very, very important. There must be something wrong with me. The boy can't say there must be something wrong with him. He doesn't have the maturity. So there must be something wrong with me for even having the ambition to be a boy. And so he renounces his masculine ambition. He becomes neuter. He becomes mommy's good little boy, and that's where he stays. Good little boy is don't offend anybody, don't get anybody angry with you, and there's a shutdown mode. In terms of neurophysiology, they are in a parasympathetic response. Parasympathetic is basically a shutdown mode. Closed, self-protective, fearful, guarded, timid, shy. That's what they live in. And then what happens? His desire to bond with men becomes eroticized. He does not feel one of the boys. Now, because the boy does not own his masculinity, he does not feel worthy of integrating the qualities of masculinity into his personal identity, he's growing up and his body grows into a male body. But when he looks in the mirror, the body is male, but he cannot integrate it. He does not have a compartment of identity to match that image. It's either overvalued or undervalued, or both. They go back and forth, okay? And so the male body is a mystery. It's something to want to connect with. It's something wanting to conquer because he does not possess it within himself. And that becomes the erotic connection. The erotic connection is a reparative. That's why we call it reparative therapy. He's trying to make that connection with the male body. And we do this with EMDR. Trying to organize these different factors in a nice, clean outline, which is the most important, which is the least important. People who become who are first acquainted with this issue want to get everything nice and ordered, and we could put the person through, and we come out the end this way. It doesn't work that way. But if there's anything that's most important, I think, it's the early mother-son relationship. If there is that attunement, malattunement, where the boy learns to dissociate, disconnect, zone out when there's a malattunement, that sets the foundation. Then he moves on to a father who is not salient, who is not strong, and pulls that boy in, overrides that boy's dissociation, allows the boy to dissociate, allows the boy to disconnect. So the father is floating in his own little world, and the boy is floating in his own little world. So from there, he fails to make that male bonding. So we have an attachment issue now becomes a gender identity issue, because without connecting to the father, he's not going to get that masculine identification. Then around 11, 12 years old, because he has this alienation and this longing for male connection, that emotional desire becomes eroticized. So now we go from attachment problem to gender problem to sexual problem. Now it's becoming a sexual problem from 11 years on older. Usually 11, 12 years old is when our clients recall their first homosexual feeling. Then he goes a little older and he gets on the internet, and around 15 years old, 16, 15, they discover a population called gay. And of course, through the internet now, they could just go in and see this whole world of gay identified individuals. They can talk to them and chat and look at pictures and all. So now, what was an attachment problem became a gender identity problem, which then became a sexual problem. Now it becomes solidified as a social political identity. And that social political identity of gay is a kind of cover. It's a shield. It protects all these other issues that developed along the way. We have two kinds of homosexuals. We have the pre-Oedipal type and the post-Oedipal type. In the history of psychoanalysis, they always love to put in two categories. For some reason, homosexuals, the feminine type versus the masculine type, the pseudo-homosexual versus the real homosexual, the pre-Oedipal, post-Oedipal. We have two types, basically. The pre-Oedipal type, we believe, did not make that bonding with the masculine. And for him, the masculine is a narcissistic object. I want what he has. He's my ideal self that I cannot find, and I am emotionally and sexually connecting with my narcissistic ideal. Okay, that is a pervasive theme in homosexuality. And again, in the psychoanalytic literature from the very beginning, homosexuality and narcissism was very much tied in conceptually. Now we do have this other kind, what we call the post-Oedipal type. And the post-Oedipal type, it may not be a narcissistic image so much, but that rather he represents comfort. He represents security. He, the post-Oedipal type, went through the Oedipal phase successfully. He did disidentify with the mother and bond with the father, but then during the latency period, experienced a series of trauma, a traumatic period in his life. Either the crazy mother, or the abusive brother, or sexual molestation, or a crazy, volatile father, who he was able to bond with early on, but now has become a volatile figure. And the boy in fantasy, or peer harassment, and the boy's fantasy is for some big, strong father figure to come along and rescue me and give me comfort. This is not so much a narcissism. In a certain way, you could say it's a narcissism because he doesn't possess that inner strength within himself. But I see it more as an emotional need rather than an identification need. He feels masculine, but he feels insecure in his masculinity. It's there, but it's insecure. And he wants this big, strong man to come and give him comfort, what we call affect regulation. And that becomes the source of his homosexual identification. This homosexual attraction, this homosexual behavior, however that behavior is manifest for the person, it could be fantasy, it could be gay porn, it could be making sexual contact, it could be even men who have lived in gay relationships for a while. But whatever it is, they're unhappy with it. They've tried it, they've explored it, they don't like it. And to be simply told, oh, this is your homophobia, work through your homophobia, it's not satisfying to them. It's intrinsically at odds with their core identity and with their core sense of values, okay? So that's our population, all right? And they're coming to us, they're hurting, they're looking for answers. They were told you're gay, learn to accept you're gay, it's not good enough. And we're committed to finding the most effective treatment that we possibly can. Reparative therapy is not just simply a focus on diminishing same-sex attraction. We deal with past trauma. We deal with male friendships. We deal with body image. We deal with assertion. We deal with facing the reality of the fact that you did not get what you needed from your childhood, whether it be mother, father, family dynamic, or whatever. We deal with identity. We deal with self-esteem. We deal with your sense of yourself in relationship to others. You're not a little boy among women. You're not a little boy among men. You're a man among men. So there's a complete transformation of identity. We address the primary defense against growing up, which is dissociation. I shut down, I go into fantasy, I go into gray zone, I become isolated, and that's where my homosexual fantasies come up. We don't attack the homosexual fantasies, we attack the self-state that preceded the homosexual fantasies. This is psychodynamic, this is psychoanalytic, this is not behavioral psychology where you attack and give negative reinforcement to the behavior you want to change. You go before it. When the client says to me, oh, last night I was 6 hours on the internet looking at gay porn, my only question to him is, how were you feeling about yourself just before you decided to go on? That's the focus. When they do remember, they remember that they were feeling bad about themselves. They were feeling weak, they were feeling isolated, and they had to go to gay porn to get that boost. Okay, now why were you feeling so bad about yourself? Why were you feeling so isolated and negative? Why? We trace it back to a shame moment. Somebody said something to you, somebody did something to you, somebody looked at you a certain way, and you had to drop. Okay? And the therapy is to bring them out, to be assertive, to be clear, to be courageous, to identify their feelings, to speak their feelings, and that moves them to heterosexuality. Now, someone listening to this will say, aren't these two separate? What does this have to do with sexuality? It has everything to do with sexuality. And this is why there's claims that, oh, we do great harm to people. We're not doing great harm. We're just moving them out of this timid, shy, shut down, parasympathetic, what we call the shame self, into the assertive, clear, strong, and that's where they find their masculinity. And when they're living in that assertive state, there is no homosexuality. The main goal of reparative therapy is feeling like a man among men. Period. If you feel like a man among men, you will not have a homosexual arousal. I think the very first session is very important because it establishes the course of the therapeutic relationship. The very first session is basically you want to convey two things. Two things. Number one, I understand you. I know what you're dealing with. I've heard this before. I know the problem. I'm familiar with the condition. I'm educated. Secondly, I can help you. Okay, I understand you and I can help you. The client will come back if he feels understood and feels like he is talking to someone who is capable of helping him. You're establishing a rapport. You're establishing trust. Now, one of the mistakes that the therapist makes in the beginning The inexperienced therapist is try to impress the client with his knowledge. And he'll talk about this and talk about this, I can do that, and then the client is not interested. He wants to know, are you interested in me? I don't want to hear about your education, I don't want to hear about how many books you read. Do you understand me, and can you help me? And it's important for the therapist to convey, I understand you and I can help you. We have to make sure that the client is in therapy because he wants to be in therapy. This is something that he wants for himself. He's not being sent there because he thinks he's going to go to hell, or because the Bible says he should be there, or because his parents are sending him there, or because his wife is sending him there. He has to be motivated to change. There are many, many studies that look at the variables that determine success. And study after study shows that the most important factor is motivation. In other words, the client desires to change. And that seems to be even more important than the particular therapeutic approach. So if the client is motivated and he wants to change, he wants to diminish something that's in his life that is distressing for him. And his dream is to be married with children, the conventional heterosexual marriage. And if he gets the right therapist, the two of them can experience real significant change. Now, we also have some clients who say, you know what, I'm not sure I want to change, but I do want to understand. I just want to understand. Then we have some other clients who say, I am gay and I don't want to understand. Well, how are we going to develop a therapeutic alliance? What are we going to be working on? And they may talk about other things. They may talk about other relations. And guess what? They will talk about assertion versus shame. A client comes into me for the first time, very first session. The first thing I say to him is, number one, do not try to please me, because part of the homosexual condition is the good little boy. They want to please the male authority figure. No, don't please me. Any suggestion I make, any interpretation I make, it's got to sound true for you. Disagree with me. Practice arguing with a man. Practice with me, because I want you to really be in your true self. We talk about the true assertive state. We talk about the false state, which is shame state. And we're always moving them away from the shame state to the assertive state. And that is a fundamental paradigm of reparative therapy. You begin by encouraging the client to understand that his homosexuality is not about sex. It's really about unmet emotional needs, and that he needs to understand his family background. You're not imposing any theory onto him. You're not expecting him to believe any theory that doesn't apply to him. He should always have the freedom to disagree. But we begin to explore. And tell me about your mother. Tell me about your father. Inevitably, you will see the pattern: over-involved, intrusive mother, distant, attached, critical father. If there's an older brother, it's a hostile, fearful relationship with the older brother. Peer rejection. If there's sexual abuse, that's in there too. But you're going to see a family pattern emerge. And you don't have to lay it on him. It comes out. And you're showing him that what he happens to be telling you about his unique childhood is a common problem. And he begins to address that. We begin to investigate, what are you attracted to? What is it about other particular men that you're attracted to? Chances are he will tell you that he is attracted to qualities and features that he wished he possessed. And so we're seeing the reparative drive already. By the way, what's really very interesting is I will ask, usually in the first session, have you ever had any heterosexual attractions even in your childhood? And they may say no, but the ones who continue the therapy will have spontaneous recollections. See, once we start to eliminate the resistance, and once they begin to feel their heterosexuality, they will have the spontaneous memory of these feelings and attractions when they were very, very young, which was suppressed. So we are well underway. He's beginning to look at his childhood past. He's beginning to see how in the present he's drawn to men, not just simply sexual, but they represent qualities of masculinity that he would like to have within himself. And you're beginning to work. Now you're beginning to look at his male relationships. You're looking at how he defensively detaches from men. We challenge him on that. We get him to look at how he is feeling before he acts out homosexually, what we call the preceding scenario. What was going on with you that prompted the desire to act out homosexually? However that happens to manifest in his life. You're well underway. And the beautiful thing about reparative therapy is you can work on one issue one week, work on another issue another week. You're going around and you're circling in and you're circling in. It's important to encourage your client to read about this, to give him some materials to read, because you can spend a lot of time of therapy educating. Whereas if he does his own reading on his own, we save a lot of time wasted on education and doing the actual therapeutic process. The actual therapeutic process is the transformative aspect of it. The person changes because of the therapeutic interaction. People don't change because of information. So you try to minimize the educational aspect and try to increase your time in doing the transformative therapeutic process work. One of the things that we find, since our clients are typically passive and they typically renounce their power to others, one of the procedures we do to counter that in reparative therapy is to say to the client, what do you want to talk about today? We turn that around and leave it to the client to identify the identified conflict. The identified conflict is, what do you want to work on in today's session? Every session begins with the client identifying for himself what he wants to work on. He has to identify a problem, an issue, a conflict, something disturbing to him that becomes the focus of the therapy. And we proceed from there. So once he identifies a conflict, we focus in on it and we go to his body. How are you feeling? What's going on inside of you? Stay connected to me. Let's push through it. Now, the working alliance is very, very important, because a working alliance means you and I together are going to work on issues and problems, and here's the punchline, as defined by the client. The client will determine what the therapist and the client are going to work on. We're always giving them the sense of freedom. We're always giving them the sense of being empowered, being in control of the relationship, and we go with that. When the client identifies the conflict he wants to work on in that session, he now goes to what we call the first triangle. The first triangle is where we focus him on his feelings in relationship to that conflict, while he stays connected to the therapist. So the therapist and the client are connected with each other while he's feeling, or at least exploring, the feelings that he has here and now about that conflict. And they usually start with something superficial, but inevitably they go to a deeper feeling. And it could be sadness, it could be anger, whatever it is. What we try to do is get the client as deeply into his feelings as possible. Now, every client is different, and we have to accept the limitations of the client, and we never make them feel uncomfortable or out of control, or somehow having to please the therapist by getting to a deeper feeling. He gets as far as he can, okay? But inevitably, we want to have an emotional breakthrough, if possible, where he has a deep feeling about this particular conflict, or at least what this particular conflict symbolizes. And so we have that affective shift, that deep emotional shift, while he stays in contact with the therapist. That's very important, because these men have trouble doing it alone, because it's too scary to do it alone. But if I trust you, if you're a good, strong man and you're my therapist, I can allow myself to go into those feelings. And usually with those deep feelings comes a breakthrough in insight. They see things clearly. They see things in a new way. They begin to realize how they've been participating in the creation of their own problem. And that's major. One of the interesting techniques that we've developed in the last year or so is doing body work on homosexual images. And so they will visualize a homosexual image. It could be some person that they're attracted to. It could be someone they saw somewhere, or it could be an image on the gay porn. And they pay attention to it, and they get into their body. And what typically happens is first it's a shy period. Oh, this is kind of weird. I'm feeling my feelings. In front of the therapist, they're embarrassed to do this because this is something they do in private. It's a fantasy. Once they get past the anxiety, they experience arousal. And the therapist is very accepting. Okay, you're getting aroused right now. You have an erection. That's fine. No problem. Go with it, go with it, go with it. And then it peaks out, and then they discover, while they're still looking at the image in their fantasy, they lose the interest. And that's where the strongest resistance comes in at that moment. They say, well, that's it. Okay, I'm finished. What else can we talk about? No, stay with it. Keep holding on to the image. And they go from that arousal to nothingness to sadness. And they begin to experience a drop, a sadness, an emptiness, a hole in the chest. And that is usually associated with one of two themes. I wish I was like him. I wish I had those features. This is the reparative drive. Or I wish I had a relationship like that. I wish he was my best friend, or I wish I had a friend like that. See, again, it always goes back to some kind of emotional longing. And the client, when they feel the sadness, they're still looking at the object in their mind. There is no arousal. And then when they return to that picture later, there is no arousal because you've broken through the illusion of homosexuality, the defense of eroticism. That's what homoeroticism is. It's a defense against the grief and the loss that goes back to early childhood traumas. As much as possible, we let the client make his own interpretations. Let him put the pieces together. When he has that affective breakthrough, there's a flood of insight. And it takes him some time to sort it out. He comes up with this and that, and the therapist is providing a safe environment to explore these ideas, to put them together. What's true, what's not true. So the therapist is holding back and giving the client plenty of opportunity to pull these ideas together based on this new surge of emotionality, affective shift. The second triangle becomes an intellectual. The first triangle is right brain emotion. Second triangle is intellectual. And now we shift. After the person has the major breakthrough, the emotional affective breakthrough, and he gets flooded with insights, then you want to reinforce and support that intellectual connection. And you say to him, we've been talking about your boss at work. Who in the past reminds you? So what we're making is a past present connection. The present is about the boss, which was your identified conflict today. This reminds me of my older brother who was a bully. This reminds me of a kid at school who used to make me feel bad. So you're making the intellectual connection, which is very psychoanalytic, that it goes back to the past. And then the other corner of the triangle is the therapist himself. Do I ever do that to you? Do I ever intimidate you? Do I ever make you feel bad about yourself? So we're checking the three most important people. The person of the conflict of the moment, significant person in the past, and the therapeutic relationship here and now. And then we do a double loop. How are you feeling about me? How am I feeling about you? We make sure everything is okay there. And then at the end we do the meaning transformation. Two parts of the meaning transformation. First part, what did you get out of the session? What did you learn? What do you take away? And he has to pull it all together. Sometimes if these sessions are so emotional, they're coming out of a fog. They say, oh, let's see, what happened? And they pull it together. And what you're doing is you're stimulating left brain. Left brain is linguistic, logical, right, sequential. So you're taking all the right brain stimulation and we're making it into logic so that he can remember it, so he can reinforce it. And then the second part of the meaning transformation phase is where the therapist adds something. I feel like you left this out, but I think this is important. I noticed when you said that, I think that's something for you to consider. So the therapist adds other components for his consideration, and that is a good session. Now this is a lot of work in 45 minutes. Our sessions are usually 45 minutes. Now if you have an hour and a half, which is a double session, you can go nice and deep and all, but many of our clients can't afford a double session. So we have to work hard and trying to accomplish all these steps in 45 minutes. You save a lot of time by getting the client to focus on his identified conflict. The sooner he can get into that, the better. Because clients come in, they start talking, free associate, because they are used to this more traditional open-ended form of psychotherapy, which does not work, or does not work as well. So get them as quickly as possible to the identified conflict. Try to get them through the procedure, move them along without making them feel rushed. And the meaning transformation for 45 minutes should be at least the last 7 minutes.
Okay.
At least 7 minutes. Now sometimes the client has trouble doing this. It's a very beautiful model, and it works for many, but it doesn't work for all. So we have to be very, very patient. The client is saying, I don't know what I'm feeling, or I'm feeling something but I don't know how to express it. I don't know how to put words to it. That's okay. We're going to go slowly. On one hand, the therapist is pushing and challenging, but more importantly, the pushing and the challenging is within the context of support and understanding. The client must never feel that he must live up to the therapist's expectations. So we go slower. Some clients go faster, some clients go slower, and that's what we do. That's why this therapy is an art. Any kind of psychotherapy is more art than science. Now, the advantage of the eye-to-eye, face-to-face therapeutic setting where the client and the therapist are looking at each other, the therapist will sometimes make a commentary on the body language. Gee, it looks like you're angry right now, or oh, I see you're making a fist right now. I'm wondering what that emotion might be. Or you're looking at this facial expression, or I'm seeing this, or something body language. And I will suggest it to the client as perhaps a hint as to what he might be feeling. Because the body will reveal more quickly than the mind. Remember, the conscious mind is conscious. It's always secondary to the unconscious, which is manifest as body. When you're doing this kind of work, one of the first things that comes up is anxiety. And anxiety is what we call a pre-emotion. It's not a real emotion. It's a block. It's an indication. Freud said that the anxiety is a danger signal to the ego. And indeed it is. The ego is suddenly being threatened by some kind of emotions that's coming up right now that is scaring me. It might be fear. I mean, it's certainly going to be fear underneath the surface of anxiety. So we try to get the client to get beyond his anxiety. We try to push it aside. We try to, what we call dismissive strategy, get past it so that he can feel whatever is behind the anxiety. In fact, one of the strategies we use is if the client is expressing symptoms of anxiety, which is usually in the stomach, butterflies, queasy, nervous in the stomach, we say, what do you think is behind your anxiety? And chances are he will move to fear, and that's up in the chest. So typically, he will go from anxiety, which is an undisclosed fear. It's something scary, but I don't know what. Then that moves to the chest. And now when the client is feeling something in the chest, you know when you're in the right zone. And he will feel fear. How do you feel fear? It's a tightness. It's a gripping. It's a squeezing in my chest. My muscles are tight. That's fear. If he releases that, it's going to either go to anger, which is an energy upward, or it's going to go to the energy down, sinking, collapsing, which is sadness. So typically, and again, these are just general guidelines for the therapist who's learning how to do this work. First they go to anxiety, then they go to fear, and then fear releases into either energy up, which is anger, or energy down, which is sadness. And that's going to be connected to the image of the identified conflict. One of the techniques that we use in reparative therapy is what we call portraiting the murderous rage. Now, our clients typically have trouble feeling and effectively expressing their anger. And I say effectively expressing as in getting the effect. They could have a temper tantrum, but that's not effective, okay? So our clients have trouble feeling their anger and expressing it to completion. And sometimes our client will identify a situation that'll bring up a lot of anger. Mother, father, older brother, somebody at school, or whatever. And we will do a technique called portraiting the murderous rage. Visualize that person, look into their eyes, feel that anger, feel it in your body, build it up in your body. From 0 to 10, how strong is it? It's a 9, it's a 10, good. How would you express it non-verbally? I would punch him, I would kick him. Left hand, right hand, how would you do that? Give me details. Okay, now you just punched him. What does he do now? He falls back. Okay, good. Now what do you do? And the therapist is encouraging him. Every so often the therapist says, what's the level of anger? Oh, it's now to an 8. Good, keep going. And they continue to go. And it doesn't have to be a big drama where they jump up out of their chair. They stay in their chair because they will artificially disperse their anger with theatricality, which is an easy out for them. We don't want theatrics. We want really feel it in your body. Own it. Express it. And the therapist encourages him to go through the completion of this murderous rage until the client can see that this person is dead or whatever. He will look into the eyes of this person and maybe feel remorse and regret. Not in a way of feeling regret, but feeling completion, feeling compassion for this person. And that is a good resolution. Now, when you look at the technique that we use, the expression of anger, there's another part of it where the client will sometimes get angry at the therapist. Now, you could do one of two things with that. You can analyze it away and see what's behind it, but sometimes it's a great opportunity for allowing the client to feel his anger and to express his anger. Sometimes it's really very therapeutic for the therapist to say, if you're angry at me, it's okay. Express it to me. You can get angry with me. It's all right. Put it out there. Even if the therapist knows it's not justified. We could talk about the justification later. But what you're doing is you're modeling a message to the client, which is, don't be afraid of your anger. I'm not afraid of your anger. So you can go ahead and do it. You're not going to kill me for it. And that was the unconscious message, that their anger can kill someone, because symbolically it did kill the parent, because the parent withdrew or the parent punished the child by disconnecting emotionally. And so it's a therapeutic opportunity for the client to experience that they can get angry and the therapist still stays connected to them at the same time. Of course, when you're doing this work, we have to understand that this is very difficult for the client, because from his family environment, he was not allowed to get angry. He was not allowed to feel real sadness, because his anger and his sadness disrupted the family dynamic. It upset mommy. You have to be the good little boy, and the good little boy never gets sad, because that'll make mommy sad or upset, and you must never get angry. So the client who comes in with a homosexual problem, see, he's coming in with a sexual problem. He doesn't even know that this is about his emotional life. He doesn't even know that he's out of touch with his feelings. Okay? And so the feelings are anger and sadness. Now, you're encountering a number of defenses. Dissociation, changing the subject, going numb, getting defensive, displacement, all kinds of defenses that we know of, and the therapist gently identifies them and brings them back. Oh, it looks like you're changing the subject right now. Oh, it looks like you're rationalizing right now. Oh, it looks like you're getting angry at yourself. You're being critical of yourself right now, which is very big for our clients. Self-shaming is a defense against sadness and anger. I mean, because they were shamed for their sadness and anger. They were shamed for their gender identity, their masculinity, which includes sadness and anger. So the therapist has to know that he has to go gently. Now the client may come in with an identified conflict, which is very nice to work with, but then he might come in with the gray zone. And this is the typical, this is what we call the Teflon client or the jellyfish client. They come in gray zone, shut down, disconnected. And our strategy for that is what we call the preceding scenario. And believe me, this is the result of 10 years of trying all different techniques. When the client comes in, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to work? I don't know. How do you feel? I don't know. Are you sure you want to be? I don't know. And then the therapist is saying, what am I going to do? Okay, and the therapist tries all different techniques. He tries confrontation. He tries becoming quiet too. Okay, we'll just sit here. We'll have an eyeball contest. That doesn't work either. And it just frustrates the client and frustrates the therapist. So what we developed as a technique around that is the preceding scenario. And the preceding scenario, the scenario preceding the gray zone that you're in now. And we say to the client, okay, so how long have you been in this gray zone state? I don't know. Always, I don't know. Let's see. Here it is, 5 o'clock in the evening. Were you this way when you woke up this morning? Yes. Okay, were you in the gray zone last night when you went to bed? Yes. Were you this way yesterday morning when you woke up? No, yesterday morning I was feeling pretty good. I was connecting to my friends. I was feeling pretty optimistic. I was being very productive. Okay, fine. So now I know, he doesn't know, but I know that he woke up in the morning in the assertion. At night he went to bed in the gray zone. Something happened in between. And that is shame. Somebody shamed him, but he doesn't know what that is. So we narrow it. Okay, when you had lunch, were you in the gray zone or assertion? Gray zone, lunch, I felt great. Okay, then it was after. And we trace it down, and then it's very interesting to see, you see that on the video, you have the aha moment. They go, and this is what you get. You go, aha. Well, I was talking to my friend, I was talking to my mother, I was talking to whatever, and they said something that made me feel bad about myself. And that is the shame moment. So now to get them out of the gray zone, I get them back to that moment. See, they can't get out of the gray zone now, they're stuck. So I say, go back to that, go to your feelings. Here we go to triangle of containment. Picture that moment, picture the face of the person who said that. Stay with your body, stay connected to me, and you will see the collapse. When he said that, I felt collapse, I felt hurt, I felt under the surface, I felt angry. Because remember, the shame moment always has an element of anger that has to be suppressed. The gray zone, which is the consequence of the shame moment, is always anger turned against the self. They're isolating themselves, they're punishing themselves. They were taught that they cannot express their anger directly, so they have to turn it again. And that's what the shame zone, the gray zone is by definition. It's anger turned against the self. And the gray zone always sets them up for homosexual enactment. Always. People say, don't speak in absolutes. Always. The client can never go from assertion to homosexual enactment. Now, one of the ways that we help the client overcome the shame that he is generating in the session is this technique called SBSS, shame-based self-statement. And what we're doing, remember, shaming is an unconscious process. It's a right brain unconscious process. They do it to themselves, they don't even realize it. So what we're doing is trying to get to the left brain. Left brain is logical, linguistic, linear. The 3 L's. Left brain, L, left brain, linguistic, logical, linear. So we say, okay, you're feeling shame right now. Okay, you're feeling bad about yourself. Give me a shame-based self-statement. And the definition of a shame-based self-statement is, number 1, short sentence, begins with I, is present tense. I am no good. I am unmasculine. I am selfish, whatever it is. Now, once the client defines his shame-based self-statement, the second step is now what we call the truth test. The reality test, the truth test. Is that true or not? Now, sometimes when they look at that, and they look at it logically, they go, of course not. I know I'm not selfish. Of course not. I know I'm masculine, and they pop out of the shame, and you actually see an affective shift. They pop out of it. They seem different in the room all of a sudden. Okay, that's great. Now, what if they say it is true? It is true that I am selfish. It is true that I am unmasculine. It is true that I'm lousy at sports. It is true that people laugh at me, whatever. So what do you do with that? You say, why is it true? Because why takes them to the past, and the past will take them to grief. I am unmasculine because I never had any adult man that taught me how to be masculine. I am selfish because I feel so deprived, I have to take care of myself, whatever. It'll take them to the past. So in any event, the SBSS procedure will get them out of the shame. It'll either move them to assertion if it's false, or move them to grief if it's true. In any event, they can process it. One of the important concepts in reparative therapy is double bind, double loop, and it's very, very important. A double bind is this. A double bind is a description of a communication pattern, and the communication pattern between two people, where somebody does something to someone that creates a negative feeling, hurt, anger, frustration, sadness, whatever. And the situation, the relationship is such that if that person expresses his hurt or expresses his anger, the other person will punish him even more. And the client knows that, the person knows that. So I am being attacked, I am being hurt, I am being frustrated. But if I speak up right now, that person has the power to make it even worse for me. So his only alternative is to shut down. That is called a double bind. And the shutdown is the self-shaming. I can't win. There's nothing I can do about this. There must be something wrong with me. I'm just weak. Okay, so here's a good basic principle. Shame moments are always double bind moments. And double bind moments are always shame moments. So shame is the psychodynamic, the introjection of the interpersonal dynamic of the double bind. Now, we do the opposite, the double loop. The double loop is the interactive process which does the opposite, takes a person out of shame and puts them into assertion. And that comes up in our therapy. The therapist has to be able to identify shame moments and pull them out by doing a double loop. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago, one technique is the SBSS, but sometimes that doesn't work. So you have to do a double loop. Okay, so what you do is sometimes the client will be hurt or upset or threatened by something the therapist said. And he'll shut down because they are shame sensitive. They are sensitive to anybody making them feel bad about themselves. Now, if the therapist sees that, so there's a block in communication because now the client is shut down. He's not talking, he's not verbalizing, he's in the gray zone. Something just happened. The therapist tries to get him to verbalize what just happened. What did I say? And he encourages the client. Now, he needs to encourage the client because the client has embedded in his mind, it doesn't pay to speak up. This never works. No one will ever listen to me. But the therapist encourages the client to verbalize it. And that the client says, well, when you said such and such and such, it made me feel bad. The worst thing the therapist can do is defend himself at the moment. Forget it. He has to say, oh, so when I said that, it made you feel disrespected. Or when I said that, it made you feel like I wasn't appreciating what you were saying. And so the therapist is feeding it back. Make sure I understand you. Am I correct? So you're doing the opposite of the double bind. You're doing a double loop. And the client feels the therapist understands. And at that moment, the client shifts to the assertion. And you see it. I feel better now. He's more expansive. His chest is opened up. And there is a bonding there. And then you say, to reinforce that, you say to the client, how are you feeling right now about me? How are you feeling about us? Again, left brain. Articulate that, own it. I feel better about you, I feel more relieved, I feel like you understand, I feel understood. I feel understood. Very important for our clients. Grief is, by definition of the reparative therapy, grief is the final stage of reparative therapy. Now, parts of grief may come up earlier on, and whenever grief comes up, you deal with it. You know, you always deal with the emotions, the affects of the client. So if he goes into grief, right away you deal with it. Grief may come up in the first triangle because, you know, the identified conflict might bring him to grief. You go there. Whenever a client feels something deep, you go there. If you're training a therapist, you say to the therapist, here are all the diagrams, here's all the charts. But when you're working with the client, you always follow his emotion. Even if it doesn't match anything and you're confused, follow the emotion, follow the affect, because it'll lead to a good session. It'll be a productive session. So grief may come up in the first triangle. It may even come up in the second triangle. When he says, the therapist says, well, this boss that you are complaining about in this session, your identified conflict, reminds you of your older brother. So that's a connection. And then he goes to the older brother and he really feels the grief of his abuse by the older brother. He really feels fully how it was for so many years to be bullied and intimidated and frightened by his brother, and his parents never rescued him. And so you go with it. You're looking at the clock, you're trying to get the most out of your session. And so the point is that grief can come up any time in the course of reparative therapy. But it's usually the final stage. And grief is really coming to terms with what happened. The really looking and feeling the full consequence of what got him to this point of homosexuality. It's got to be about not feeling loved or understood by his parents and feeling the full weight of that. When the client goes into his grief, there are two aspects of grief. And the two aspects of grief, and this is when the therapist knows that the client is in grief, is sadness for the self and anger at the other, whoever that other was. When the client is feeling anger at the other and sadness for the self, you know you're going into grief work, and which is very, very valuable. Now, we know theoretically in reparative therapy that shame is a defense against grief. From earliest childhood, the boy defends against the grief of his situation, the deep sadness of his family environment, of not feeling understood, not feeling loved. His childhood defense is shame. He shames himself. This goes back to Freud's early paper in 1917, Mourning and Melancholia. Mourning and melancholia. Mourning is grief. Melancholia is a mood, which is the gray zone. So the gray zone is a halfway grief. Okay. So what did Freud say? Freud said that the child cannot tolerate the reality that he is unloved and unseen, namely grief. He cannot tolerate that. He cannot say, my parents are inadequate. My parents are failing in seeing me. It's too overwhelming for a child. So what he does, he shames himself. That's the beginning of shame. Now, Freud called it guilt, we call it shame. Technical reasons to be discussed some other time, because shame did not exist in Freud's vocabulary. He called it guilt. That's a different story. So the boy shames himself to defend against grief. Okay, so now when you're working with the client, when the client gets angry at himself and defends the other, he goes into shame. You reverse it by pointing it out. You say, wait a minute, I hear you defending the person who attacked you. I hear you making excuses for that person that made you feel bad. You confront. And logic will win over. Now, if they don't win over with the logic, then that means it's going to take a little longer time, because this person is deeply ego identified with his defense of shame. Well, one of the important aspects of the reparative therapy, from the very beginning of reparative therapy, we saw the importance of close male friendships. And we discovered that the close male friendships, the attachment that is really being sought through sex, is really going to be sought and fulfilled more directly through close male friendships. So we encourage our clients to have close friendships with straight men. And that is where they get the 3 A's: attention, affection, approval. Very important. Because our men are so alienated from masculinity, because our clients perceive masculinity as a mystery, they have difficulty reading straight men. And they very often interpret a straight guy's non-response as rejection. You know, straight men are not very expressive of their emotions, and so our clients are very inclined to interpret the wrong way and are more likely to project negative perceptions that really don't exist. And so we have to do some educational things about straight guys. And the therapist can be a vehicle. He can be a sort of ambassador to what straight men act and how they feel, because there's an educational piece that's in there. Now, at what point do we encourage our clients to develop these close male friendships? Early on, especially when the client begins to understand what his homosexuality is about. He's beginning to understand the origins of it, that it's really about unmet emotional needs, that it's really about a desire to connect with men. When he becomes clear with that, then he can present himself to some straight friends and take a chance and maybe disclose. But he has to do it with discretion. You just don't blurt it out to people who can't handle it. You have to make sure that the straight friend that you tell is mature and responsible and respectful of that information. So as soon as the client begins to realize within himself that he needs to have close male friendships, then he will choose maybe 1 or 2 good men that he can talk to and tell. And we know the way to proceed. There's a procedure for doing this. Number 1, you just don't say, I'm gay and I'm trying to not be gay. You're going to confuse your friend. You talk about the early family background. You talk about the consequence in terms of your insecurities about your masculinity. You talk about your realization that it's necessary to have close male friendships, and you disclose. And chances are, from my experience, we're always surprised how many straight men can really understand and respectfully respond to those needs. It's a good idea for the client to talk to the therapist first before he discloses to a straight friend, because we want to make sure that it's a smart decision. It's not an emotional decision. Sometimes the client will make a mistake. Because he is attracted to a guy and wants to be close to him, he thinks that his way of getting close is to disclose. Now, the guy doesn't particularly care about him. The other guy doesn't particularly have an emotional interest, but he is so drawn to wanting to be close to him and has a fantasy that if he tells his story, the male will respond. And then sometimes that will backfire. So we want to make sure that our client is making a sensible evaluation of who this guy is. So one of the preparations is, what if your friend doesn't respond? Now, typically what we get is this. The straight friend will listen and hear and then do nothing with it. Now, our client is waiting. Is he going to do something? Is he going to say something? And all he does is listen, and seems to be rather sympathetic, but doesn't do anything about it. And then when my client sees him the next time after this big talk, the friend doesn't bring it up, doesn't talk about it. Well, what happens is the straight friend doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't know he should bring it up. And so he's waiting for the client to tell him. And so we tell our clients, when you disclose to a straight friend, tell your friend, talk to me about it. Please ask me how I'm doing. I want you to kind of be actively involved in my life. And that would be the best response that can really help the client. The question becomes, when is the client ready to start to move on to opposite sex attraction? And the answer is when he's ready. The therapist certainly can't force it, can't push it. You cannot prematurely promote it. The client will reach a certain point where his same-sex attractions diminish. And because he's a sexual being, and since his sexual energy does not go toward men, it's going to naturally start to go toward women. And without even dealing with it as a therapeutic issue, our clients begin to notice women for the first time, just on their own. And they are surprised that they are noticing women in a very favorable way. Because now men on the street recede to the background. They're not as interesting, and women seem to come to the foreground of their awareness. And so that is a time to start to talk about possibly dating, possibly getting to know a young woman. And we do it gradually, and we could do it with EMDR, we could do it with body work, we could do it by talking and education. And what we're doing is opening up the potential, the heterosexual potential that we believe every client has. We believe all our clients are heterosexual in their true nature. All we have to do is remove the barriers, and usually the barrier is fear. For example, I would say to him, well, is there any young lady that you would like to get to know a little better? I don't even want to use the word dating, it's too threatening at this point. So we say, is there a young lady you would like to get to know better? Well, yes, there is this young girl in my office, and she's kind of pretty, she's kind of cute, and I kind of like her. Okay, good, so let's do body work on that. So in the triangle of containment, visualize her at her desk, picture her at work or during lunch hour or something. Stay with your body, stay connected to me. Let's do some body work. And typically they're going to get anxious. And then fear, we go to push through the fear and we see what's there. Now we might get assertion, or we might get the drop of depletion, and that is anticipatory shame. And that's going to inevitably go back to the mother. The second triangle will inevitably be the mother. When I was around my mother, I lost power. And when I'm around her, I'm going to lose power. Well, we don't really put the emphasis on actual dating skills. We might have to spend a little time talking about how you conduct yourself, how you could talk to her, what you can do, what you can say. But surprisingly, these men are very comfortable around women. So they know how to talk to women. They know how to make a conversation. So that's not usually the problem. The problem is really the internal sense of fear, and that's what we address. And the universal fear of women is, I'm going to lose my power. She's going to have expectations of me. She's going to want things from me. And if I don't give it to her, she's going to be angry or disappointed or hurt. And I'm afraid of hurting women. This goes back to the mother. The role of the pre-homosexual boy was keep mommy happy. And if mommy is dissatisfied with me, or angry with me, or displeased with me, or disappointed with me, then I feel that shame. And he's bringing that into the relationship, that anticipatory shame into the relationship with the woman. And so much of the therapy is, how do you want to be your own person with her? The trick is this: how can you stay connected to yourself while you're connected to her? Because with the mother-son relationship, either I'm connected to me, away from mother, or I lose myself and am too connected to my mother. The trick here is to stay connected to me while I'm with this young lady, talking to her. And we do this EMDR, which is very effective in this area, or body work. The question becomes, at what point does the client disclose to the young lady his same-sex attraction, his history of homosexuality? Well, we don't advise that they say it right away, because that could turn off the young lady who doesn't know him. So we want him to continue the relationship. He doesn't have to talk about his homosexual background. Continue the relationship, get to know her, give her a chance to get to know you. But I believe in principle that we owe it to the woman to know the history of the client at the point where they are getting into a serious relationship. When there is a implicit or explicit relationship that we are committed to each other, that we might be thinking about marriage, it's getting to that level of seriousness, then I really believe that the client needs to disclose to the woman, not only for her sake, because she deserves to know, but also for his sake. I can tell you that in the 30 years that I've been doing this work, all my men have disclosed to a woman, and never has a woman rejected the client if she gets to know him, knows him as a person. Only in one situation did a man actually get married and never told his wife about his homosexuality, and that has been a disaster for him, because I had follow-up. I've been in touch with him since then. He got married, he has 3 children, but his wife does not know. And he is suffering a great deal because he has a need for close male friendship. And his wife doesn't even understand what his needs are. Whereas if she understands, she could support him in that. Yeah. So we believe that. In the very first session, I tell the client, number one, do not agree to anything I say unless it fits you. Feel free to disagree with me. Secondly, it is your responsibility to begin every session with what you want to talk about. And number 3, try journaling. Journaling is very important. Now, rule number one is don't do anything I tell you if you don't want to do it. So if you don't want to journal, don't journal. Okay? But I'm just telling you that people who advance fastest in therapy are the people that journal. Why journaling? If you journal at the end of every session, what did I learn? What did I take away from my session? How do I understand myself better? You will, number one, deepen the cognitive awareness. You're stimulating the left brain. Because sometimes you're coming out of a therapeutic process, it's all right brain, it's all emotional, and it doesn't lift over to the left side of the brain. By journaling and writing it out, you're learning it better, you're understanding it better. That's number one. Number 2, you're having a history of your progress, because a lot of our clients get very discouraged. And we say, if you're feeling discouraged, read your journal for the last 3 months, the last 6 months. And they go, wow, I realize how far I've come. I remember that was a problem. It's not even a problem. I haven't even thought of it as a problem. See, they need to see their own progress. So those are basically the 2 reasons why we encourage our clients to journal. If I find out that there's a support group, whether it be so many different types of support groups, I won't even mention them. But if they can get into a support group of men, that's also very, very important, because we all need help in keeping us focused on our goals for ourselves, especially in this particular issue where the whole culture is telling you you can't change, you really are gay. These clients need to be surrounded by a small group of people who understand and encourage what they're trying to accomplish for themselves. How big should the group be? One of the rules is 8 is the best. Now, a number of studies many studies have been done. What's the best size of a group? It's too small, too big? It seems like 8 is the best number. So the thing you remember is 8 is great. So you can go 7 or 6 or 9, 10, but try to keep it around 8. If it gets much bigger, then you want to have 2 groups. Okay, so you have to really define what are we here for? Why are we gathering? We're gathering certainly as a support group. What does that mean? We're here to encourage each other. We're here to educate each other. We're here to help each other with particular problems that come up. Okay? And we all share the same objective. The same objective is that we are here because we want to diminish our same-sex attraction, correct? But at the same time, you can fail. We don't care how many times you fail. We're not going to judge you. So while we are focused on trying to get you, the individual, to diminish the same-sex attraction, we're going to not judge in any way. A person can come in and report acting out, whatever, we're totally accepting. But what we are doing is challenging. We are going to, in a very supportive, loving way, we're also going to challenge you. We're going to challenge you to take responsibility for your behavior. So you can come in and say you were at a gay orgy all weekend. We're not going to judge that, but we expect you to say, why did I go? What made me go there? What did I learn about that experience? What do I understand about myself? That's an important requirement for each member. Now, what you could do is a quick check-in. Everyone, quick check-in. How are you doing? Where are you at tonight? You go around. And then we leave it open-ended about who wants to talk. What you want to do is you don't want it to turn into one-on-one therapy with people watching. But you can do it a little bit. For example, if a person's talking and you feel like they're not really talking from their feelings, you may say to them, how are you feeling right now in your body as you say that? Oh, I don't know. So stay with it. See what you're feeling. And he may be stuck. He may be stuck. I'll turn to another person. And I like to do that. Keep them awake. What do you think he might be feeling? Oh, I'd be feeling nervous, okay. What do you think he's feeling? He might be scared. Hold it. He said scared, he said nervous. What do you think? See, I like to mix it. You got to mix it. Otherwise, they tend to go in their little shell and they're like this for 2 hours and they go home. The important thing is nothing matters. Nothing is important unless you keep that energy going. That they should know that you as a group leader will turn to this one and say, what do you think of what he just said? What do you think he's feeling when he said, how do you feel when he said that? Oh, they wake up because they were daydreaming. See, they all want to go into their trance state. And the healing of homosexuality is making that connection with other men. I think 2 hours should be really focused on their experience. What's going on now? Look, the problem with the homosexual, remember the homosexual problem is not a problem in sexuality. It's about assertion. Assertion versus anticipatory shame, shut down. And the group experience is challenging them to move out of their safety, to talk, to express, to put themselves out to another man or to other men, to get feedback, go into your assertion, feel your feelings, disagree with someone. It's rare for people to have the opportunity to learn from their experiences. And I think the ex-gay, there's plenty of written material, but what they need is interaction. What you're dealing with is a tendency to shut down and to isolate and to be the good little boy and to compliant. And group therapy is challenging to express their feelings. Group therapy is challenging to make emotional connection, to reach out to other people. That is what the ex-gay needs. If you have a drop-in group, it's not going to last because people can decide up until the last minute if they want to go to group. And the time to go to group is when you are being in conflict. The time that you don't want to go in group is when you should go to group. Something happened, you should talk to the group about it, but it's too difficult and they go, oh, should I go? And they don't go. So if you want your group to last, if you want your group to develop a cohesiveness, it should be required. If you join the group, and here's the rule, if you join the group, you are expected to show up. And if you don't show up, you either should tell another member of the group or tell the group leader why you're not coming, okay? Because when they can come in or not come in, you make it easy for them to avoid the times when they really need to come in. Do you understand what I mean by that? Yes. In other words, they just act it out, okay, during the week. And that's the time to come, but they don't want to come at that time. So they come when it's easy, but they don't come when it's difficult. This way you have to come. So we expect membership. And when the client walks in late, if a member walks in late, I don't mind 5 minutes late, but if a client walks in late to the extent that his entrance disrupts the group, then it's valid for the group leader to say, why are you late? The only time you expel somebody is if they are disrupting the group. If they are not, if their involvement in the group is working against the group. The most important thing that they sign is confidentiality. That what is said in these groups stay in this group. And that we have to really respect the privacy and the confidentiality of every group member. So we're asking, not only are we asking, we require each member to really respect the privacy of all other members. I think the men need to be with the men. They're too much with women in their life anyway. And this is a male thing. And they're going to talk about things that are particular to the male problem, mostly sexuality and gender identity. I think that the group leader being heterosexual is good because you're a model of male acceptance, okay? I think you can get training as you go. You learn as you go. The problem with having a woman in the session is they might feel inhibited in talking about their sexuality, talking about the details of their sexuality. But if they can develop a trusting relationship toward the couple, I think it would be an advantage. You could do 8 weeks and then end, and then decide if you want to continue. Or you could have an ongoing group, which means people come for 2-3 months or however long they want to come, but the group is ongoing. EMDR is a very strange technique when you become first introduced to it. Anybody that finds out what is EMDR for the first time thinks it's kind of weird. You're moving your eyes left, right, left, right. Basically what you're doing is you're asking the client to hold on to a traumatic memory and move their eyes left, right, left, right, left, right. And then when they go back to the traumatic memory, it loses the power, the affect. Why this is would take days to explain, but I'll give it to you real quick. It appears that trauma goes into the right brain, which is connected to the body. So we need to know that the right brain is connected to the body. The left brain is more the thinking cognitive function. When you think left brain, think the 3 L's. Left brain, linguistic, logical, linear. So it appears that trauma goes into the right brain but does not get processed by the left brain. And so resolution, that theoretical concept, that psychodynamic concept of resolution, can be seen on a neurophysiological level as the integration of left brain, right brain. So what you're doing is you're holding on to the trauma, you're stimulating the right brain affect, the affect of the right brain, and you're processing it with the left brain. And there's something about the left brain processing of the right brain affect that diminishes the importance of it. So the client is able to recall the trauma, but not have a traumatic hook into it. Why is this important? Because these unresolved traumatic memories stay alive in the neurophysiological level and tend to get reactivated. So an unresolved trauma is going to be likely to be reactivated. If a boy is traumatized by a dog that bites him, he's going to be afraid of other dogs.
You call that embodied memory.
Embodied memory, that's exactly right. See, this goes from our body work. See, the body work turned us on to the affects, the affective dimension. And so the affective dimension, now seen as an important part of reparative therapy, is being applied through EMDR. The application of our understanding of the importance of affect is being processed through EMDR. Okay, so a boy who is bitten by a dog and has a traumatic memory is going to be afraid of other dogs because he's anticipating it's still alive in his network. Okay, if he resolves the traumatic memory of having been bitten, that's no longer a ready wiring to emerge when he sees another dog. He's not going to be afraid of other dogs. He's going to see them as having nothing to do with the past trauma. Okay, now, so EMDR has a great deal of empirical literature showing itself to be the most effective treatment for trauma. And so we use it for trauma because we understand that homosexuality is the result of childhood trauma. And if we can resolve the trauma, we're resolving the neurophysiological foundation for homosexuality. Okay. Now we've gone beyond that and we're using EMDR for directly targeting homosexual attractions. We are seeing that we can now do EMDR on homoerotic images, whether it be pornographic or just pictures of men that they're attracted to. So they'll get the arousal, and then you do EMDR, and they can look at the male image in not a emotionally engaging way. They could see the guy just simply as another guy, and we have some really great video examples of these sessions of using EMDR on homoerotic images, or not even homoerotic, male images. This is the most exciting aspect of reparative therapy today. We ask a client to either imagine, remember, or bring in a picture that has a sexual charge. It could be pornographic, it could be just a picture of a model or anybody on the street, it could be anything. And we ask him from 0 to 10, how strong is your sexual arousal? We use SUA, subjective unit of arousal, from 0 to 10. The client says 7, 8, or 9. Okay, fine. Put that aside. Now we get him to look at his assertion versus his shame. And the client should be already familiar with these two terms because it's fundamental to reparative therapy. Even before starting the EMDR, the client should know the difference between his assertive state and his shame state. The assertive state is good and strong and solid and secure and masculine, in his own words. And his shame state is, I feel small, I feel inferior, I feel weak, I feel like a little boy, I feel unmasculine. Once he knows those differences, you will say to him, okay, right now, if 0 is shame completely and 10 is assertion completely, where are you on the scale? He might say a 5 or a 6. Okay. Now, we want him to look at that picture again that he felt a 9 of arousal. But before we get him to look at that picture with arousal of 9, we want to build up his assertion, and we do it with the 3 memory, persons, symbols. A memory, when did you ever feel strong and successful and you had accomplished something, you feel good about? Okay, remember that. Use some EMDR, let's build it up. Persons, can you think of anybody that really affirms you as a man and makes you feel good about yourself? Bring that in, some EMDR. Build up that number. Use a symbol. What would be a symbol that represents your masculinity? It's very interesting what those symbols are sometimes because you're working with the unconscious at this time. Mm-hmm. So you're using, you don't have to use all 3. You can use only 1 or 2 or 3. You want to get that assertion at least a 7. Okay. 8 or 9 ideally. At least a 7. Now, when he's holding on to that, you ask him, what are your somatic markers? Somatic markers are, where do you feel that assertion? Locate it. Give me 3 places in your body. I feel solid in my chest. I feel strong in my back. I feel a warmth in my chest. I feel a clarity of my vision. I feel my voice. Whatever it is, know what those 3 somatic markers are. Remember them so that when you're in your when you are in your shame and you want to find your assertion, those assertive markers will help you go into it. Okay. Now that the client is holding on to his 7 or 8 assertion, now look at the picture. And you could be sure that the arousal is like maybe 1 or 2. And now you do some sets. Hold the arousal of 1 or 2, hold your assertion of 7 or 8, let's go back and forth. And you will see that the assertion goes up and the arousal goes down. So you're teaching the client in a very dramatic way, you have control over your homosexuality. The client, to get aroused, has to leave his assertive state and go into his shame state. When he is in his assertive state and feeling good and solid as a man, there is no homosexual arousal. And then I'll say to my clients, okay, now that you have no arousal, get aroused. Let's see how you do that. And they try to do that, and then I say to them, what did you do to get aroused? And they don't even know what they did. And you have to work with them a little bit. And then we have this on video. We have good examples of this on video, where they have to abandon their assertion and they have to go into the little boy. They have to become weak. And then from that weak position, weak, pathetic, small, then they get aroused. And a psychoanalyst whose name was Joyce McDougall said that in all perversions, including homosexuality, the participant has to play a role. It has to be a theater role. They have to leave their authentic identity and enact what they call a sexual theater. That was the term she used. And our clients exactly have to do that. And the more the client becomes aware that he must first go into the shame self, the more difficult it's going to be for him to do that, because now he knows it's like a trick. In order for me to be aroused, I have to go into this false role. And the very awareness of it takes the fun away. It's like a magic trick. You know, the more you know how magic trick works, there's no more fun. You remember when you were a child and you saw a horror movie? What do? You remind yourself it's just a movie. So that helps you. It gives you an objectivity, right?
Yes.
And so to get aroused, you have to kind of play this game with yourself. And the more you know the game, the less power the game has. The power of the homosexuality is not in the image, not in how this guy looks, but how you're feeling about yourself, how you're seeing him. And we're teaching our client how to see other men. We're teaching our client how to relate to other men. And that's the secret of reparative therapy. This is very interesting, because if you ask a gay man, how do you know you're gay? He says, well, when I see a good-looking guy, I get that jolt of excitement. And they call that a sexual jolt. When you look at it very closely, it's not a sexual jolt, it's fear. When you analyze that sexual moment, the homosexual moment, clearly, it's not one moment of arousal. It's really 3 steps. First, it's fear. And then the fear drops to the shame, affect, depletion, dropping, sinking, collapsing, hollow. And then the sex comes in. The sex is a reparation. The sex is an attempt to conquer. Now, the guy who's in reparative therapy and he pays attention to those homosexual moments will see that it's 3 steps. But the 3 steps happen so quickly in microseconds that it looks like one event. Okay? Now, the question becomes, why would a homosexual have a fear reaction to a good-looking man? Why is it first fear? And the answer is because he's walking around with an inferiority. He's walking around with what we call the preconscious. It's not even conscious, it's preconscious awareness of my inferiority. I'm not quite a man. I'm not good enough. And then when he sees a good-looking masculine man, it's like a painful, jolting reminder of all that I am not. The image of him is a shaming. It's a shocking threat to my sense of self. And so he drops down. That's the shame reaction. And then the sex kicks in to compensate. Why sex? Because sex is used as a way of conquering, of mastering. We know that. The early psychoanalytic literature says that sex is not just sex. It's an attempt at conquering. By sexualizing it, he now feels a power. He now feels a surge. He feels and that's why the gay man is always using sex. Why is the gay man always sexual? Gay men love to say, oh, I'm just a sexual being. Why? They use sex for depression. They use sex for loneliness. They use sex for anxiety. They use sex for all kinds of affect regulations because it's something they just grab and use. Now, let's compare with a heterosexual man. A heterosexual man sees a good-looking woman. He doesn't get fear unless he wants to conquer her, or that's a different story. But if he just sees a beautiful woman, he's not going to get a tightness in his chest. Pay attention next time. The next time you see a beautiful woman, you're not going to get a tightness in your chest. You're going to get an expansion. You're going to get a ah. You're not going to get a You're going to get a ah. That's the difference. Now, this is it. The homosexual condition is a fear of men and a fear of women. I see men and I am afraid that they remind me of my inferiority. And I see women and I could like them as friends, but if I get close, I'm afraid that I'm going to lose my power. We see how power, inferiority of one's masculinity, is the source of fear toward men and a source of fear toward women. So he avoids women and he eroticizes men. That captures the homosexual condition. So the point is this: by sexualizing the fear reaction, by overriding the fear with the sexual drive, you're symbolically conquering the man. Because if I can get his attention, if he could be interested, and many clients will tell me this, if I can get a man to pay attention to me, to be interested in me, I feel like I'm conquering him. That there is something about me that he wants. And so much of homosexual activity is a dominant submission. I'm either small and weak against this big, strong man, or I am dominating him and he is small and weak. It's a real play of power, which we don't see in the heterosexual relationship unless it's a distorted heterosexual relationship. But if it's a normal, healthy man-woman relationship, No one has to dominate anybody. It can be complete compatibility. I bring my masculinity in, you bring your femininity in. We're not in competition, we're compatible. There are times when the therapist can say, I don't think I can work with you. Either because of a personality difficulty, because it would prompt negative feelings in the therapist, what they call a negative countertransference reaction, where for some reason there's something about this client that the therapist cannot work with, or the client has particular problems that are beyond the scope of skill for the therapist. He doesn't know how to handle this particular problem. Because sometimes you can have a client who comes in with a homosexual problem, but he has other things that are getting in the way. Yeah, whatever issues are that the therapist feels he cannot handle. I will often say, go take care of that problem first. And then when you resolve that problem, let's come back. For example, an alcoholic problem. He has a difficulty with drinking. He's an alcoholic client. And you cannot make any inroads with the homosexuality if he is dealing with his alcoholism, if he has not resolved his alcoholism. That's just one example. Or severe depression, or other kinds of issues. So those would be the reasons. The therapist may reach a point where he says, gee, I think the client is finished. He must never say to the client, I think you're finished, because it's not for him to say. Because if you say that, the client might say, finished? I don't think I'm finished. I got this and this and this and this. And the therapist goes, oh my God, either I missed those points or I underestimated, I underestimated the importance for him. So if the therapist suspects that it's time to terminate, he will ask the client, let's evaluate. Where do we stand? What have we accomplished? What else is there for us to do? Let's look at the big picture. The time to terminate, a good termination is when both the client and the therapist think it's time to end. If the therapist wants to end and the client doesn't, then the client is not finished. If the client wants to end but the therapist thinks he should stay, then the client should consider what the therapist is saying. It's his final decision. It's certainly up to the client to continue or not to continue, but he should consider what the therapist is saying. I'll have a client who'll come in and say, I think I'm ready to terminate. And I'll say, okay, you think you're terminating, but I think there's still this issue, there's still this issue, and there's still this. You've made advances, but you're not finished with this, or finished with this, or finished with this. And it's up to you. You can terminate if you like, but these are some issues that I think still remain for you. But a really good termination is when both of them see clearly that there's no more work to be done. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean he'll never have a homosexual thought or feeling again? Certainly not. But he leaves having the skills to understand what those attractions are about. He has the skills to put into practice what he can do about it when they arise. And the homosexual power will be much less in his life. And I tell my clients, you can always come back. I'll get clients who will come back after 5 years or even 10 years. They'll call me up and I won't remember them at all, but then when I see them, it'll all come back to me very, very quickly. And that's typically a good termination.